The pair sat together, staring off in companionable silence. They stayed that way for several minutes until a commotion by the fire drew their attention. Apparently, the wildling's argument had been resolved, and by the look of things, not to everyone's liking. Ness in particular was stomping around, kicking rocks, as she grabbed various items scattered throughout the camp. Aiton and Phelan shared a look. Curious, the dragonette wandered over and caught Rena's attention. He pointed to Ness and made a questioning gesture.
Ness fly tribe, more dragonettes.
She fly tribe? Aiton asked, testing the new word.
She fly tribe, get companion.
Okay, she's taking news back home and getting... someone? From the context, there seemed to be more to the word than he originally thought. Get huntresses?
Yes, no?
Rena looked a little uncertain.
Companion, yes. Huntresses, maybe.
Companion? The huntress waved at him.
Companion.
Okay. Maybe there were some connotations of that word he was missing. It would be interesting to meet this companion, whoever they were. With just her bow and belt to weigh her down, Ness only needed a short run to get airborne. She made a few circles to gain altitude before flying off at a fast clip, on a course destined somewhere to the northwest. Exactly how far she was travelling wasn't clear. When Aiton managed to ask how long she would be gone, the answer he received was,
"Less day."
Whether that meant an hour or getting back before their next breakfast was hard to say, and the huntress didn't actually seem too sure herself. With Ness on her way, Rena returned to preparing the venison, now aided by both Aiton and Atali. It didn't take long to finish the butchering process and season the cuts with salt and wild herbs. The wildlings had balked at the amount of salt that Aiton was using. To them, it was probably like pouring an entire jar of honey onto a few apples. But eventually he managed to get across the idea that Phelan was providing the salt, and it was what he wanted. They acquiesced, although neither seemed particularly happy about putting something so valuable on common deer. Most of the meat went over the coals to cook on spits. The scraps, Aiton added to the now empty porridge pot along with water, the remaining seasonings, and a handful of oats. It was about as basic a stew as there was, but it would do. "Tribe?" Aiton asked, as they were clearing up from the butchery. He wanted to know more about the wildlings before trying to hire them as, well, mercenaries.
"Tribe, yes?"
Rena asked in return. He wanted to ask how many there were, but realized they didn't have their word for numbers. With a shrug, he indicated the two of them, as well as Atali, and held up 3 fingers, then repeated, "Tribe? Ah!" She clearly understood the question, but seemed unsure of how to answer. At first she tried to hold up fingers, but quickly gave up the attempt. Suddenly, her eyes seemed to light up. There was a pile of firewood nearby. Rena snagged a long, slender stick. After clearing a patch of dirt, she made 10 deep dots. With each dot she spoke a word, which Aiton dutifully repeated. 1, 2, 3. When she was done, she circled all of the dots. Then she started drawing more circles, again accompanied by their number. 20, 30, 40. At 100, she stopped and held out one hand, silently counting.
"Tribe, 180 dragonettes, maybe."
180 dragonettes was a good-sized group. Larger than the population of most keeps, in fact. Huntresses? Warriors? Rena looked like she was about to answer when Atali barked something at her. It sounded chastising, and the more junior huntress looked a little chagrined.
"Sorry,"
she told Aiton, and shook her head. I guess Phelan isn't the only paranoid one here. He had been trying to get an idea of how many fighters they might be able to hire, but if some stranger came up to Luffing Keep and started asking how many defenders they could muster, he would be suspicious as well. Instead of hunting for some more innocuous topic, Rena turned the question around.
"You, tribe?"
Deciding it couldn't hurt to answer truthfully, Aiton replied, "Much flying, much days." He pointed vaguely to the southwest.
"Fly big water? Ocean?"
He nodded. "Dragon fly much.
Dragon Phelan."
It was obvious what she was thinking. "Bad dragon," he explained. A snapped stick and pointing at his wing told the rest of the story. She looked incredulous, maybe even a little sick.
Bad dragon break wing?
Yes, bad dragon break wing. Bad dragonettes break good dragonettes.
Good dragonettes?
She pointed at him, then spread her arms in question.
Others?
Aiton nodded. Me. Others.
More sleep?
Bad sleep?
Dead?
Dead, he echoed.
Good dragonettes dead. Bad dragonettes? Bad dragon?
Now she looked worried, and Athalie appeared to be listening intently from nearby. Why do I keep messing things up like this? Aiton turned towards Phelan, hoping for some guidance, but the dragon just returned his gaze curiously. Of course, he doesn't know the language. Sighing, he decided to answer truthfully. 4 bad dragonettes dead. Phelan make dead. He pointed back towards the ruined keep. Bad dragon, bad dragonettes. Fly my tribe. Your tribe bad dragonettes? Athalie demanded. Desperately shaking his head, Aiton said, No, my tribe good dragonettes. Bad dragonettes. How to describe demanding ransom? Should he even try? He set a pile of rocks in front of the senior huntress. Yours. Then he snatched one away. That got a grudging nod. Steal. They steal my tribe. Steal. He pointed at the pile of supplies. Phelan and I fight. Aiton picked up his spear and jabbed it in the air. He was exaggerating his own actions in the ambush, but that didn't really matter. Athalie's next question wasn't one they had words for. It took some gesturing and back and forth to get the question across, but in the end the point was clear. She wanted to know if the brigands would return, and when. Aiton thought about consulting with Phelan. He wasn't ready for this conversation. He didn't know enough of the language, and the senior huntress was looking unhappier each time he opened his mouth, but he knew that evading the question would make them look even worse. The best option would be to continue the course he had started on. They return here, he confirmed, and saw Athalie's expression harden. Maybe 17 days, maybe 25 days. Bad dragonettes come. Phelan fight. I fight. You'll bring death. Dragon Phelan brings death. With a few quick steps, Athalie took to the skies. The senior huntress didn't travel far, just to the top of the canyon walls, but it was beyond easy reach for anyone without working wings. Rena looked unhappy as she explained her leader's words. She appeared hurt and maybe even betrayed. It made Aiton feel sick. He hadn't done anything to hurt these people. If he did nothing, they would probably escape notice when the brigands returned. But if he and Phelan recruited them, some would certainly die. Maybe all of them. He wouldn't lie to them about that. If worst came to worst, he and Phelan would face Xantha and Calfor and all the others alone. And then they would both die. I have to convince her, he thought to himself. I have to. Athalie was the senior huntress. She was the one Rena would follow, even if it was grudgingly. And it was her word that would carry the most weight with the rest of the tribe. How, though? He needed to explain, to make her understand what he and Phelan were fighting, how much the tribe stood to gain from helping them. And he needed a peace offering. What happened? Phelan asked, as Aiton stood and strode past. What did they say? I told them about Xantha and the rest. They weren't happy. Ah. That word didn't come with any condemnation, but Aiton felt it all the same. They're not dumb, he said, as he started picking through the cache looking for something in particular. They have eyes, and they can see that we don't exactly look like conquering heroes. Hells, I wouldn't be surprised if Athalie thinks we're thieves. We have this big pile of loot and we're being chased. Sounds pretty suspicious when you put it that way. Phelan bristled slightly at the insinuation, but seemed to accept the logic after a moment's thought. A point. How do we convince them otherwise? One of the boxes looked about the right size, but it was filled with bolts of fabric. Aiton set that one aside before he answered. I don't know if we do. Phelan's eyes narrowed. We are no thieves. No, but we can't prove it. At the very least, we can come across as honourable thieves. He got a snort in response, and allowed himself a small smile. Yes, I know, but we fed them, gave them gifts, and treated them with hospitality. Hopefully our actions carry weight and continue to do so. Another crate looked like a likely candidate. This time he was rewarded by softly clinking metal as he pried it open, and he smiled down at the contents. The perfect peace offering for a huntress. Rena was waiting for him when he returned. She cast a questioning look at the small wooden box he carried.
What?
Good, was all that Aiton would say. He needed the words to express what would come next. They talked for hours, only stopping to tend the fire and remove meat from the flames as it cooked. Aiton made Rena carry the first of the steaks to Phelan. To the oceans with mystery, they needed to see that the dragon wasn't some kind of monster. The huntress was practically quivering as she approached, steaming meat held out on strips of freshly cut bark. But Aiton had insisted, and swore that she would be safe. Phelan was gracious as he bent his neck down and almost delicately snapped up the first piece of venison. Rena looked like she wanted to bolt, but Aiton put a steadying hand on her shoulder.
Thank you.
The dragon had learned that much of the wildling tongue at least.
You are welcome,
Rena managed in response. To Aiton he said,
Please tell her that this is delicious. I have not eaten better in some time.
The dragonet nodded.
Phelan say meat good, he relayed to Rena. No eat much good meat in many days. I make bad meat.
The last was said with a self-deprecating smile. She had eaten some of his Terox after all. Rena nodded jerkily before withdrawing. Aiton followed right behind as Phelan enjoyed his meal. They went back to their language lessons, occasionally pausing to sample the stew or turn the tougher cuts of meat slow roasting over the fire. Athalie was still on her perch above the camp. It was hard to tell if she was on watch for threats from within or without, and Aiton did his best to ignore her. That was until the sun had risen just past its zenith. After just a few hours, he wasn't fluent in the wildling tongue. Far from it. They had an odd way of speaking and strung words out in ways that didn't sound right. But once he had realized that, everything began to fall into place. There was a flow to the way Rena spoke, and words were easier to place once he got used to it. Some were still unfamiliar, but it was easier to guess their meanings. And with practice, he was beginning to pick out more familiar words behind the accent. It would have to be enough. Athalie, we need to talk. The senior huntress flicked a near dismissively at Aiton's call. About what? All things. When she didn't immediately move, he added, Please. Grumpily, she rose to her feet and took to the sky. Circling the camp twice to gain altitude, she tucked her wings and dove like a falcon on a rabbit. It looked as if she were going to slam into the rocky canyon floor, but at the last moment, Athalie flared. In an impressive display of skill, the senior huntress came to a stop within arm's length of the source of her ire. Well, I wait. But Aiton didn't back down. He looked up to the taller dragonet and resolutely returned her stare. Phelan and I do not mean to bring death. Athalie snorted. But you do. We may. We bring death to enemies. Enemies may bring us death, not you. He didn't catch every word of the other's response, but he caught the idea. Empty promises. We could have no death. Could hide. Not hard. Forest big. Aiton waved expansively all around him. Hard look. Big look. Dragon find you. She seemed so sure that he hesitated. Does she think dragons have some sort of magic? That might explain it. Aiton knew that like all dragonets, the wildlings held magic. Rena had seemed familiar with the concept at least, although she did not volunteer what her own talent may be. Explaining that dragons had no magic beyond their breath and resistance to their particular element wasn't the point of this conversation, and Phelan wouldn't appreciate Aiton giving away all of his secrets, not when the truth would work just as well. Dragon not find Phelan before. Look days. Think him dead. We hide, they not find. And we not hide. We fight. Fight evil. They corrupt. They darklings. Phelan didn't need to know the language to understand those words. They were close enough to his own tongue that his eyes narrowed in recognition. But they had briefly discussed what Aiton was about to say, and so he did not interrupt. No, not darklings, Aiton admitted. Leader looked good friend. Not a friend. Thief. Kill dragonets. Kill friends. She evil. Athalie's condescending demeanor shifted to something not quite so hostile, but she wasn't stupid. She knew there was a catch.
You fight dragon, you die. You want us to fight? You want us to die?
We do not want you to die, Aiton insisted, and then took a deep breath. We ask you to fight. Her hard, bitter laugh cut like a knife.
We fight dragon, we die. Not our fight.
Not your fight, he quickly agreed. Phelan kill evil dragon. That was technically true. No doubt Phelan would claim that kill, but he would need help to do it, both to get Calfor on the ground and keep the blue dragon there. He did not mention that right then.
Need help to fight evil dragonettes. Ask help to fight.
Ask! Her word came out almost like a curse, and Atterley glared at Phelan. With how much fear and awe the wildlings seemed to hold for the dragon, that must have taken an iron will to pull off. But she managed.
Ask, Aiton repeated. First, we give gift.
The small box was sitting where he had left it. Aiton removed the top with a flourish. Inside, nestled in little beds of straw, were several dozen metal arrowheads. Most were simple iron hunting tips, with a few broadheads mixed in. A handful were even the narrow hardened steel design used to punch through armor. Neither huntress could disguise their interest in the bounty. It would have been like throwing open a chest full of gold or mithril back home. Still, Atterley was wary, and Rena followed her leader's example. She had been listening to the conversation, and Aiton could tell that parts of it hadn't pleased her.
Gift for help? No, gift for gift, Aiton explained. You give help, we give more metal, more steel, more salt.
Bow is gift, he said, indicating Rena's new weapon. Then he pointed to the stew pot. Deer is gift. This. He picked up the box of arrowheads and extended it. Is gift. Hesitantly, the senior huntress reached out and plucked a steel broadhead out of its straw nest. The grey point shone dully in the sun as she turned it over in one hand. Her jaw was clenched and ears immobile, like she was trying to keep any expression off of her face. Whether that was good or bad was impossible to say.
Hello, the camp!
The shout was so unexpected that everyone jumped. Atterley blanched as she dropped the arrowhead to the rocky ground. She seemed terrified that the fall had damaged it, but of course the steel didn't have so much as a scuff. 4 wildlings were descending from above. Ness was in the lead, and it had been her shouted greeting that surprised them. 2 of the others had the look of guards or scouts. They each clutched spears, a more similar garb to the trio he had first met. Between that and their short bows, they were likely fellow huntresses. Both women barely spared a glance for the unfamiliar dragonette. Their attention was fully focused on Phelan. The last of the group stumbled as he landed. He was the only male among them, and the flight had obviously been hard on him. Panting and wheezing, he nonetheless pushed himself to his full, if average, height. He was unarmed, save for what looked like a knife in his belt, and his clothing was far from the practical wear of the rest. It was baggy in places, as if sized for someone bigger than he was, and embroidered with intricate patterns of stitching. The whole thing was dyed various shades of blue, in a pattern that seemed more like a patchwork than a deliberate design.
Companion Q,
Atterley said, formally. The young man, and Aiton realized that the oddly dressed dragonette couldn't be much older than he was, completely ignored the senior huntress. Like his escorts, his attention was fixed on Phelan. Atterley frowned as he began to step purposefully towards the dragon, but she didn't move to stop him. He was the first wildling they had seen who didn't seem terrified of Phelan. In fact, his ears were pricked and eyes wide in a look of pure awe as he stopped, just a few wingspans away from the enormous red dragon. Phelan looked down at the dragonette with curiosity. He didn't know nearly as much wildling as Aiton, but he knew a few words.
Hello, I am Phelan.
Whatever either of them had expected, it wasn't the wildling prostrating himself in front of the dragon. Their mouths hung open, ears forward and eyes wide, as the dragonette began to chant,
Dragon Phelan! Dragon Phelan! Dragon Phelan!